0 al Barcelona. Un toque para Hurtado. Falta. Aquí vemos a Purizar, el arquero de Sporting Cristal. El tiro libre para el conjunto peruano de Miguel Company.
Well, I am honored and pleased as Punch to be here today. You look around this room and you see a lot of my own heroes and a lot of my friends, and I am, it's like my bar mitzvah all over again with all these, you know, there's some concern in the hallway. People are coming up to me and, you know, it's an AMA-sponsored event. Did they know about it? I said, well, you know, I must say that when I first heard I was invited to speak, I sort of felt like Prince Charles being invited to address the opening of the Argentinian soccer season. But Dr. Sam here, Dr. Nixon, my mentor, warned me not to be too outlandish, so I have to warn you that my talks do tend to be hazardous to a lot of people's preconceptions, but I hope that they will both stimulate and at the same time get people a little concerned about where we're going on this issue. Matt Myers is another person you can blame for being here because we were at Ron Davis's and Dr. Koop's seminar with the Interagency Council on Smoking last October on tobacco sponsorship of sports, and Matt felt that this is the kind of talk that sort of cuts across all the issues that we're going to deal with. I look upon this as a learning experience for me too. In fact, I think that it would be good to see people going to the working groups that they know least about so that we can begin to learn as much as we believe that we already know. And as George Gitlitz told me, it's important that we check our agendas at the door, that we look at self-interest and where we're coming from, but also, well, to look at people such as ourselves who might not be strictly in the research mode. I'm in the enviable position of having met or spoken with most of the people in here, and I find this an incredible opportunity. A lot of people can't be here, and I think we owe a debt of gratitude. Some people passed away recently, Dr. Shimkin, Dr. Oxner, Dr. Terry. Janet Terry is with us in spirit. She's up in Philadelphia. I think that Dick Overholt was just honored by the Massachusetts Gas Organization. These are people that have struggled when this issue was not at all acceptable within any health community, really. And I think that's something that we look at this history, we look at the momentum we've done, and we're proud, but I think we've got to realize how difficult it was and how much sacrifice was made by a lot of people. I've spoken with every Surgeon General since Leroy Burney and talked with them about this issue and have been impressed how much they want to deal with it. Mike Perchuk and Dr. LeMaitre, David Burns, Don Shoplin, we edited all those years the Surgeon General's reports. And George Seldy is a journalist who in the 1930s was trying to bring this attention to the public and was censored by every major newspaper. Morton Mintz, who just retired from the Washington Post. Joe Davis, the medical examiner at Dade County, Florida, who was writing about death certificates and smoking back in the early 1970s with Charles Tate. And Tony Schwartz, my mentor in the advertising thing, I hope we'll see some of his ads today. Of course, I do gravitate toward the activists. I'm proud and pleased to have known the Bugger Up people from Australia. That stands for Billboard Utilizing Graffitists Against Unhealthy Promotions. Gar Mahood from Canada, who couldn't be here, and Neil Colashaw is here representing Canada. But incredible things going on this past year. Bill C-51, the passage of a bill to ban tobacco advertising. Not so easy to do in this country, and if I get confusing, just look in today's Houston Post. I had it planned that would be a backup, because I wrote about what I feel could be done about cigarette advertising. And if you don't understand that, then I got another exhibit over at the library. Greg Connolly, Ed Sweda, Stan Glantz, Gina Carlson, all the people, it's incredible to just selectively pick out, but I think it's important to know that the activists are who I have felt most close to. And so I say to the others, just take an activist to breakfast tomorrow and get to know him. The year was 1964. My father was in Luther Terry's infantry, you could say. He was a family doctor, member of the AMA, and who handed me the JAMA and the Surgeon General's report when I was a high school editor and said, read this is fascinating. And JAMA had an editorial that I used as the basis for an editorial I wrote. And what's so fascinating is today he would have been 80 years old. And in effect, it's something that I know that he got me involved in, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to carry it on. I would say, as Virchow said, a famous pathologist, you're not going to publish in my journal unless you're willing to make a fool out of yourself in public. And that's the way I feel about the medical journals I edit, about the way this issue is. And I think that the whole language and linguistics of this issue has had to be changed. Just as Jesse Jackson's talking about African Americans now, that's going to best be the language that we should be dealing with. So I think we've got to start looking at what the words anti-smoking and smoker and non-smoker, whether this is really getting across to the public. Can we look at linguistically at placing what we would like to be known as, if we are all agreed, in the language? To the average individual, to the Red Man Chew tobacco tractor pull that I went to, will the people attending that understand that we're not here to just talk about telling people what to do with their lives? We're here to try to change the language, and I always tell the story of Harry Truman, who was a very salty president, and who was at a garden show, and a woman asked him to judge her flowers, and he said, well, those are damn swell flowers. You must have used some damn swell manure. And the woman by this time was beet red and went over to Bess, Harry's wife, and said, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should get him to use more polite words like fertilizer. And Bess just laughed and stared her straight in the face and said, you should be grateful. It took me 25 years to get him to say manure. So, you know, we're not anti-smokers. We are anti-heart disease, anti-cancer, anti-high medical cost, and anti-anyone who sticks up for the most cowardly and corrupt industry that has ever occurred. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk about a consumer advocacy vocabulary. Looking at the myths of the industry, the biggest myth of all, of course, is that they're getting out of the tobacco business. Nothing could be further from the truth, as you'll see. The myth that we should be debating the Tobacco Institute. I mean, it's got to make you laugh, and that's what we've got to begin doing. The Tobacco Institute. It's like the Asbestos Institute. They wouldn't have, or the Arsenic Institute, or the Hermann Goering Institute. It doesn't make any sense at all. And that's who they are. I think it's important. They want to bring them down to the Wyndham Hotel and stay in Cooley's Hotel. Fine, but let's bring down their bosses. Let's bring down Tisch or Maxwell or people that we don't know, or Kravitz, as Dr. Connolly's going to talk about later today, and get to know the people who are pushing tobacco. Yesterday, the Tisch brothers gave $30 million to New York University to, and it's going to be renamed Tisch Hospital. Now here's the owner of a tobacco company, so he gets some coming and going. I mean, it truly. But the last time I debated a tobacco industry person was 10 years, and I quickly learned, as someone told me in Texas at the TMA meeting back then, was you don't wrestle in the mud with pig, because you both get dirty and the pig loves it, and that's basically the way we do. Well, let's just show who we are, and let's get right to looking at the imagery that we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be militant anti-smoking people here, and so remember that we're not anti-smoking, and the people from the media who have to run to the other side to get the other side of the story. It was once told of U Thant, the Secretary General that if someone said 1 + 1 is 2, and the other one said 1 + 1 is 4, that U Thant would probably decide 1 + 1 was 3. And that's basically the tragedy of the mass media coverage of this issue. And that's the problem. There are no two sides with 90,000 deaths a year. The true smokers' rights movement can't be here today. Most of them are 6 feet under, and that's the problem. We don't really have this particular issue well represented. But 100 years ago in Texas, you might have gone into a saloon and seen a typical father and son belling up to the bar with, of course, the spittoon at the bottom. And then something happened in medicine. Koch's postulates discovered that if you spread tuberculosis, you did so through spitting, and people began to associate spitting tobacco with tuberculosis. And so a number of legislators began to agitate for more anti-spitting ordinances, and thus the tobacco companies at that time, which made tobacco largely in plug tobacco, cigars, and pipes, had to shift gears and to create the promotion of the mass inhalation of smoking through cigarettes. And so we've really changed that, right? We've gone away from tobacco. We changed the way in which we've used it. And 100 years later, we wouldn't really have kids, according to the industry. They don't go after kids. Not exactly. This is from Dr. Brent Blue in Wyoming at one of a number of ski resorts where the Marlboro Ski Challenge, for the price of a candy bar, you can go down and see Marlboro logos all along the way. And I'm going to lead into why I feel an advertising ban is of concern to me, not because I don't support it, but because of how easily, looking at the semiotics, looking at the symbols, and looking at how quickly the tobacco industry has been able to create alternative images, how sadly behind this we are. I'm going to try to propose proactive stances. And again, I was serious about reacting to the tobacco industry. Don't react to them. Let's proactively get them constantly having to react to us, being on the defensive. And let's show up at tobacco industry meetings. I welcome you in the tobacco industry who's here. I think it's marvelous that you came. I know you're going to see committed people here who have ethics and who really you should invite to your meetings and invite to meet your corporate leaders who've brought you here today. There are a few people in the tobacco industry here. So let's look at who you are in the tobacco industry. This is the people that the focus of this problem should be on. This is the leading cause of death in our society is not lung cancer or heart disease. It's not even smoking. It's Marlboro. That's the #1 preventable cause of death in this country. That's what kids are buying. And I know I'm not going to play as much to adults as I do to kids, but I believe that smoking is an end-stage disease. I believe that much too much attention, proportionately, has been devoted to smoking cessation at the expense of true committed smoking prevention. If we devoted even a scintilla of the effort to juvenile onset tobacco abuse, as we do to other forms of drug abuse, or to, let's say, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis or other juvenile diabetes mellitus, we would really be in the money. But we haven't captured the public imagination with the vocabulary. Whatever the reason, this is still seen as a moralistic issue. Well, actually, this slide is not really accurate. It may be the tobacco, but this is a bit more accurate. I think that that's really probably the most important slide that I could have brought today, because there you are. The #1 preventable cause of death in our society is Marlboro, manufactured by Philip Morris, the makers of Jell-O, General Foods Products, Post cereals. Steve Allen is coming out with a book this summer called The Non-Smoker's Rights, but Steve Allen works for Philip Morris. He didn't know that at the time they called me, but he works for Post cereals. Lena Horne, all sorts of people, John Denver, have worked for this particular tobacco company. I'll go into later why I feel that's extremely significant, why they buy off journalistic scrutiny, why they buy off scrutiny at all. They make Marlboro, Virginia Slims, Merit, Parliament. The next brand, RJR Nabisco, makers of Nabisco cookies and Salem and Camel. Every time you buy an Oreo cookie, it seems to me you are helping to support Winston cigarette advertising. Lowe's or Lorillard, that's what this fellow Tish I just mentioned is head of. He also is the president of CBS. Lowe's makes Newport or True cigarettes or Kent 3. I guess Kent 1 and 2 sort of bumped off so many folks that they call it Kent 3. And Brown and Williamson, makers of Cool cigarettes owned by British American Tobacco. They also own Saks Fifth Avenue. American Brands, which is a manufacturer of a variety of products, and still the highest profit item, though, and that's the key thing to remember, that while their total diversification may be getting greater and greater, that's very much like the AIDS virus infecting other industries. It's even in the insurance industry, where the top shareholders of the tobacco companies are the health insurance industry. And I think the greatest story of the year was not even Prop 99 in California or C-51 in Canada or the Cipollone case that Dick Daynard helped to mastermind and others, or the nicotine report that Ron Davis got through and the latest report that Ken Warner did, but really the fact that Metropolitan Life Insurance Company has sued RJR Nabisco for not protecting their long-term bond investment. I mean, you figure that one out, and that's where we are, where a health insurance company is a leading shareholder of a tobacco company. Liggett & Myers makes, by the American brands is Lucky Strike and Carlton. Liggett & Myers is generic cigarettes, and United States tobacco company makers of Skoal Bandits. That's just a typical way in which this industry is about to launch. I understand they're going to have tobacco-flavored Jell-O, but, you know, it's just a rumor for now. And you see Bill Cosby, and look at this one, though. This is really the whole myth. Remember, they have not changed. Diversification is an illusion, and I've gone to these social investing seminars where people don't want to talk about tobacco companies because they say, oh, they're getting out of the business. Just look at the profits. The profits are higher than ever before because the product is a fake product. Cigarettes inherently are consumer fraud. It costs nothing to manufacture, and basically it's pure profit. All of the money goes into the advertising of it. And rest assured, now the Wall Street Journal, I kid you not, last week's paper, calls the tobacco companies, now they call them the household products companies. And that's where we are, because they are ahead of the game in the linguistic approach to this particular problem. But this is indeed a cigarette advertising. You're not seeing something. But if you were a child growing up in England, you would recognize that instantly as a brand called Silk Cut. And all you see, that is a cigarette advertisement for cigarettes, and yet all you do see is the warning. So let me just, and Matt produced an excellent report, but let me just lop off for once and for all, in my opinion, that last one about enhancing the warnings on cigarette advertising as being in any way, shape, or form. You may have heard the story that I had in JAM about the pregnant lady that I had, and I was talking about smoking. She said, "Oh no, well, I want you to know that all my friends and I would never buy the warnings that say it causes fetal injury. We only buy the ones that say it contains carbon monoxide." You know, or the fellow that I saw in the pharmacy that was asking for a pack of cigarettes, and he handed it back. He said, "No, I want the ones with the new warnings. I don't want the old, I want the new warnings." I couldn't figure it out. Finally, it hit me. He wanted the fresher tobacco. So, you know, the point being that warning labels, sorry guys, that's not where it's at. And I would get rid of the warnings. Personally, we got to help Dick Dana. We got to really look at liability situations here. The top corporate spenders on sports marketing. Number one is Philip Morris. This is an outdated revenue figure, but it's a minimum estimate. RGR Nabisco. The last two of the next ones are alcohol companies, and I think we've got to be getting much closer to our colleagues in the Center for Science and Public Interest and other people who've got the goods on the alcohol industry, and take a look at what Anheuser-Busch is doing to children by selling puppies to sell beer. You've seen that cartoon that says, "Pop, is there some kind of law that says you got to be an athlete to be in a beer commercial?" I mean, that's the kind of a thing that we're leading people to believe, the total one-to-one association between athletics and beer and tobacco. And I think that my bet, I don't know whether the Macy's Day Parade next November is going to have Spuds MacKenzie or the camel in the camel ad. It's going to be hard to see which of the balloons is going to be coming down Fifth Avenue. But play hardball in a $47 billion industry. We're going to talk about sports marketing because I think that a lot of these issues bring to bear why I am concerned about an advertising ban. You ban advertising. By the time you ban it, get it through the Houses of Congress and get it through a signature through a man who was the Grand Marshal last year in this city of the Virginia Slims tennis event, you get a president to sign that kind of bill, we're going to be old and gray. And I think that the important thing to remember is that by that time that bill passes, we are going to see this industry being the sponsors of the Marlboro World Series, the Winston Super Bowl, and so forth, and they really already are. The top 5 smokes in sports, according to Sports Inc., a magazine devoted entirely to the business of sports. Marlboro Red. They are in the Marlboro Racing Team, the Marlboro Soccer Cup, the Marlboro Ski events that you saw. Virginia Slims for the Virginia Slims World Championship Series. The important aspect is that they're there. R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris are there with Winston, Camel, and Vantage. They have since changed that last one from the Vantage Cup to the Premier Cup, and we'll see what we're going to be doing about that one. Because we in DOC have developed something we hope that every physician in the United States will do, the Premier Sputum Cup that we hope that we'll be asking that every patient to give when we ask for sputum to test to see whether they have lung cancer. They'll give us sputum in the Premier Sputum Cup. The history of this, the connection between tobacco and sports is not new. It's as old as sport itself, organized sports, and in fact the very use of the name Bull Durham came from the fact that signs for tobacco were on the outfield fences of baseball stadiums, behind which the pitchers would warm up, and that term became the bullpen after Bull Durham. It wasn't really until the latter part of the century that tobacco trading cards were developed, the cigarette of quality featuring famous athletes, but really we got a break. We got a break around 1913 when Sweet Capital Cigarettes got hit by a suit by Hannes Wagner from the Pittsburgh Pirates, who was outraged that he would appear on a tobacco trading card. Smart man, because his heirs probably are hanging on to all of the 4 or 5 remaining cards, and each of which is worth in excess of $50,000, the most valuable baseball card, because he didn't want himself appearing on a tobacco trading card. And then really we got into the 1930s. This is not old. This is just 50 years ago when Joe DiMaggio and Lou Gehrig could say they could smoke as many as they pleased. And athletes in every sport were doing this. It's really, truly a tragedy of incredible proportions that even as we're beginning to know about the devastating impact of smoking, we had athletes pushing cigarettes. And if you went to New York and you walked into Brooklyn with a pack of Camels, you had to watch for your life because they knew instantly that you were a Yankee fan. So closely identified were brand names to different teams. Lucky Strike was my Dodgers, and Chesterfield was the Giants, and Camel cigarettes were the Yankees. They soon changed to the filters when the health scares came into the 1950s and Winston cigarettes began promoting the Yankees. But along this time, we can't just blame sports stars. Doctors were being used. Doctors were being used on radio and TV to say,
the pages of American history are illumined by the names of doctors who worked unceasingly to overcome disease and to make life happier and more secure for humanity. The makers of Camels are pardonably proud of the standing of this cigarette among doctors. A nationwide survey of doctors' cigarette preferences was recently made. 3 leading independent research organizations asked this question of 113,597 doctors in every field of medicine. What cigarette do you smoke, doctor? The brand named most was Camel. Yes?
According to a recent nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
When you take your first puff from a Camel cigarette, there's a delighted response from your T-zone. That's T for taste and T for throat.
well, they used to talk about the T-zone, T for taste and T for throat. We say today, unfortunately, T for tracheostomy, which is the hole you've got to drill in the lung. But I think it's important to look at how this industry actually used doctors, and much of this is illustrated in the exhibit at the library this particular month. But then we had, mercifully, people from the American Cancer Society and others, and John Banzhaf, who helped launch the effort to get tobacco advertising off the air in the 1950s. What kind of tobacco advertising? We're going to show an example of a typical commercial from the 1950s. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. You know, the best laid plans. I think that's the wrong tape, but that's not the one. But it's interesting, that is the right tape, come to think about it, because that's now owned by Philip Morris.
Behind every champion, there's a secret. And here's Buster McCalla showing you the form that has made him a champion water skier. Buster, what's your secret?
First, always wear a life belt. As to my secret, just remember two things. Keep your arms straight and your knees bent. Keep saying that over and over to yourself like I do. Arms straight, knees bent. Arms straight, knees bent.
Yes, behind every champion, there's a secret. And L&M has found the secret that unlocks the flavor in a filter cigarette. In today's L&M, fine tobaccos can be blended.
Blended, blended, blended.
Not to suit a filter, but to suit your taste. So you get more taste by far.
That's why I smoke L&M. More taste.
L&M has found the secret that unlocks the flavor in a filter cigarette.
The important aspect of this is that that went off the air, we like to think. And what happened was we were able to get rid of the ads, and we started putting on counter-advertising, such as Bill Talman from Perry Mason, who used to say, I used to play the loser, now I am the district attorney. I used to lose these cases to Perry Mason, now I'm a real loser, I've got lung cancer. So take some advice from somebody who's been smoking and losing. If you don't smoke, don't start. If you smoke now, quit, don't be a loser. Those ads were so successful that they reduced the expected sales of cigarettes, according to work by Warner and others, by upwards of 12% over a 3-year period. Incredible finding when we realized the only independent variable was the counter-advertisement. So, in effect, you don't see these advertisements on TV anymore for Marlboro Country, or do you? Because this is a typical advertisement off a typical Shea Stadium billboard on a typical evening on Channel 9 New York or ESPN. I don't know whether anyone can read the warning from the back of the room, but the important thing is that it hasn't changed. There's more cigarette advertising today than ever before on television. Now, as an example of that, I'm going to ask for the videotape in just a second, so if we get ready for tape 2. And what this is really, it's a kind of narco-philanthropy. This was, I just couldn't resist making this slide a week ago. This article appeared, it was originally Washington Post, about how Colombia has resigned itself now to no longer being able to rid its country of the drug pushers there, because they go around, they give baseball stadiums, and they give basketball courts, and the kids love these guys. Narco-philanthropy. And there they are in our country. What is the difference between a government here that supports tobacco subsidies and wants to go down and burn the crops in Bolivia and invites in to be a campaign chairman, a vice president of Philip Morris, or brings them in the White House, or what have you? This is narco-philanthropy of the highest order, because it's not even being recognized as that. Let's try the videotape as an example of how clever this industry is for getting around the ban on tobacco advertising on TV.
Interestingly enough, the Formula One race today gives us sort of an idea of what to expect if there were a ban. In Great Britain, there is already a ban on cigarette and tobacco ads. The Grand Prix of Great Britain will be shown here today on ESPN, and the drivers, pit crew, and everyone else associated have covered their logos up, yet the main design of the ad is still there. It almost brings more attention to it. A game of which ad is that really comes into play. The West German team now, Zaxby, you see, well, they just played it by putting East on their car and on their shirts. It's just that simple, they discovered, to step across this line of controversy.
It's become a matter of, now there is a magazine that just started this month called TV Sports, and this is their leading advertiser. I think it's important to understand that if you turn on the TV section, take the TV section any given Sunday, this literally was just a couple of months ago. Every single event listed there has tobacco sponsorship. The Camel GTO Series auto race, the Washington Redskins, which at RFK Stadium has a Winston billboard, the Dallas Cowboys have a Marlboro billboard, Houston Astrodome Marlboro, Virginia Slims speaks for itself, Copa Marlboro, the American League champion Red Sox have Marlboro, and so forth. The Vantage, every single one now is tobacco sponsored. This is the Marlboro 500. Except that's how USA Today, a leading financier, leading recipient of tobacco industry largesse, the New York Times Company, another major recipient, they are a co-sponsor of the Virginia Slims tennis tournament. They print the programs for Virginia Slims. That's the New York Times, get the spelling, because it's important to understand that that is probably the biggest single hindrance to this issue among the media. If the Times were to have a mature policy on this particular issue, I think you'd start to see dominoes fall. But they don't. This is how ABC chooses to advertise the Marlboro 500. They decide for some unknown reason to call it the Michigan 500, even though when you turn on ABC, you see it referred to only as the Marlboro 500. And this is indeed the typical driver there. I don't know if anyone can make out what's on his helmet. That's the logo of Spider-Man. And I think it's important to look at how they're going after kids. This is a typical array of Marlboro race cars that you can buy in toy stores in case you can't get out to the track. And this, indeed, is exactly what it looks like. This, I couldn't resist. This is indeed the Pope blessing the Marlboro race car. And the Pope did bless the Vatican Art Exhibition sponsored by Philip Morris. So I'm completely serious about this. There is no accident. There's no accident, and there's the Marlboro logo at the other end of this slide. I mean, you're talking about something that is beyond belief. This is a young lady I saw in England. I asked her if she wouldn't mind being photographed. She sort of wondered why I asked her to turn around, but this is what you see. You don't even have to know it's a logo of a cigarette brand. Take out the Marlboro and you still see the chevron there. That's the thing. That's what I meant by semiotics. And it's called youth marketing, get them while they're young. And that's the whole tragedy. You could turn on and see the Skoal Bandit race team almost any Sunday, but you won't see specials from MD Anderson on the oral cancer that Helmut Gephardt and others have to remove by taking away half the face of this particular individual. There's no cure for that. But when has Hollywood ever made a movie, ever once, on someone dying of cancerous diseases due to smoking? As far as I know, apart from the disease of the week of everything under the sun, the rarer the disease, the more the Hollywood specials, there's never been a single person I've ever seen on any television program die of a tobacco-related disease. And here's the Camel proceeds. And I did this just because I didn't want to confuse you. Up at the top there, it does look a little strange to see the AMA there, but that is in fact the American Motorcyclist Association, so we wanted to set that record straight right here when you hear the... Now, if you turn on the broadcast, you'll hear them talking about how the AMA is supporting camel racing, and it's unbelievable to hear the actual tape of hearing them praise the AMA. But Valvoline, Miller, PPG, this is from a company that actually measures the sponsorship time and on TV in-focus exposure, and you'll see a discussion, brief discussion, about how Skoal Bandit, Marlboro make their way around the law in a slightly different way.
Everybody's eligible to subscribe to it, but not really everybody would want to. It's an industry publication that really serves the sponsors, the team owners, the track owners, the sanctioning bodies, as well as the drivers. People that need to justify their program, either to the sponsors or the sponsors need to justify to their board of directors.
Phil, this has to be a monumental task to generate all of these statistics. What are the logistics of doing it?
What we do is we measure the amount of clear in-focus exposure that a sponsor receives from the broadcast. And we then equate that amount of time to what it costs to advertise on the program, or the cost per 30, the advertising rate. and we give it the exact same value if you had advertised and bought that amount of time on television.
For example, on this ESPN broadcast from Darlington in 1986, you're riding along with Buddy Baker via the in-car camera. Notice how prominent the Crisco logo is on the dashboard, and just ahead your eyes pick up the Folgers logo on the back of the 25 car. Both of these sponsor IDs are measured by the sponsor's report. In this shot from North Wilkesboro, again, notice the 7-Eleven sticker behind Kyle Petty's head. In this year's Daytona 500, 6.5 million homes were tuned into the CBS broadcast. Bobby Allison won the thrilling race, but in terms of in-focus television exposure, Darrell Waltrip's Tide Machine came out on top. Waltrip's car collected 14 minutes and 44 seconds of TV time. If Procter & Gamble, the manufacturers of Tide soap, had purchased the same amount of commercial time on CBS, the bill would have been over $2 million.
Give us an example in dollars and cents of what a team might expect to get.
Well, why don't we take Wrangler, because they won the championship. Last year, from 29 programs, the Wrangler identification was seen on television, and this includes the replays on ESPN, for just under 7.5 hours. If Wrangler had gone out and bought 7.5 hours of television on CBS and ABC and ESPN and the syndications, they would have spent in excess of $7 million to accumulate that amount of time on television.
This is going to be a woman narrating why it's important to have women watching auto racing.
44 to 47% of our fans are women, and they buy the products. Our car is an accurate reflection of what it was, the Snelling automotive products, the Coors beer, the cigarettes. But you look down pit road now, you see Piedmont Airlines, Red Baron frozen pizza, Kraft Bullseye barbecue sauce. I mean, you have something that's appealing to women because the sport appeals to women, especially in the Southeast, Dave. The people in the major companies are realizing that to market their product in the Southeast, this is the sport to do it with.
Nearly half the women in the grandstand, nearly half the fans in the grandstand today are women. That's why Tide and Crisco are here.
This is just another example of typical sports on TV, the Marlboro Speedboat, the Winston drag racing that you see here in Houston. This is now an actual television event called The Winston. That was televised last May, and we sent a telegram to Congressman Waxman and others to try to get them to look at an injunction on this, because he had tried to do this previously and it had some success. We've tried for 10 years to get the Attorney Generals to look at this issue. This is how NBC Sports advertises the Winston Finals. And this is how the companies blend their imagery into their other products. This is R.J. Reynolds' Hawaiian Punch product giving you discount tickets for the Winston Finals. And you can also see the Hawaiian Punch race car at the event itself. This is the kid-size Winston Cup car competitions that they have. And this is just a typical headline from the advertising trade press, how right they are, how correct they are to show how Philip Morris is the best at attracting new smokers. And who are they? They're kids that read comic books, such as this one for Tang Orange Drink, with Pele, the soccer star, telling kids to join the Tang soccer team. And this is the kind of thing that kids sent away for. And then when they turn on TV to watch soccer, this is the kind of thing that they will see, the Marlboro Soccer Cup. This is now an official thing. In 1994, Philip Morris looks as though it's going to be the sponsor of our nation's World Cup soccer match. The agenda has been set, unless we can stop this now. They are 6 years ahead, because we don't use a map, a calendar, and a coloring book. They do. They make everything colorful. They go where the kids are. They take out maps. They know the concentration of where kids are, and they use calendars. They know every holiday. They know exactly where kids want to be during holidays. This is how Camel seeks the Spanish market through soccer series. This is how they're going after in our area in Texas and also in California by sponsoring soccer matches. A typical shot off the TV screen off of a European soccer match. And this is something that's 10 years old. My wife, Doris, and I did this just to look. We picked up a number of sports magazines over a number of months, and we calculated 10 years ago, and nothing has changed. If anything, it's gotten far worse today, that cigarette advertising makes up well over 25% of sports magazines. Well, what do you do? Well, we happen to have a Sports Illustrated handy right about here, and another example of it right there. And, you know, the typical juxtaposition, it's the most popular magazine among teenagers. I've gone to athletic coaches, I've said, what are your 12-year-old, 14-year-old boys reading, the ones that can? And the invariable answer is Sports Illustrated and and Playboy. They're not reading boys. So here's what Dr. Richards, Dr. Houston, and I do. We take a look. We're on an airline. I hope you don't mind. I happen to bring this with me for my last Continental flight. And you got this magazine there, and it's got Oral Hershiser, and then you've got a Salem pop-up ad, and you've got a back cover for menthol, Marlboros, or what have you. So we happen to have a supply which we'd make readily available to anyone who'd like these, also to school trustees for their high school schoolrooms or what have you. We have stickers that say, many of the ads in this magazine are misleading, deceptive, and a ripoff. For example, smoking does not make one glamorous, macho, successful, or athletic. It does make one sick, poor, and dead. And we slap it right on there, and we put it right back in the same spot. This is a typical shot from 2 weeks ago from Sports Illustrated. Just a typical, average, ordinary shot of some basketball player. And this is their advertisement in tobacco trade publications, urging you to come out smoking and get what they call the 18 to 49-year-olds. It's an actual ad urging tobacco advertisers to be sure to reach kids. And as Dr. Connolly will tell you, there hasn't been a single mention of the tobacco problem in Sports Illustrated in its 30-year existence. This is Florence Joyner, a lookalike, who's done remarkable things, and look how quickly she was used, a lookalike of her, in the Marlboro Sports Calendar every month. Now, how would you like it if kids learned to read by reading your ad? Says, believe it or not, Sports Illustrated for kids, with such advertisements as Philip Morris can produce for the Kool-Aid sports coolers just for kids. This is the trend of blending their sister and brother products in. Well, what do? I wanted to launch into some counter-advertising measures, but first to tell you why. I truly believe that paid counter-advertising is the first and foremost objective that I would like to see to direct this industry out of town, laugh them out of town. I think that the proof of what we saw when the counter-ad started to go onto the air is evident that that's where we should be using that, and use your dedicated excise taxes for that. I feel that the very best bill that's being presented in our tobacco and promotion section is Senator Bradley's bill, which would remove the business deductibility of taxes of cigarette advertising. And that in and of itself would provide as much revenue as anything to produce the campaign that we're talking about. And you can tell how hard the industry hates that bill, because that's the one they are fighting most against. And the advertising agencies are fighting most against it. That would not be unconstitutional. That would have no problems, and it wouldn't involve any additional taxes. A ban on tobacco advertising is obviously what we all would love to see, but I don't see how. I think we should work for it and then probably get a compromise with the ban on their deductibility. The Clean Air legislation is where Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights, GASP, and other groups have really had the sine qua non of success in this country. We are way ahead of the world, and thanks to Congressman Durbin and others and Senator Lautenberg, we have really made our country on the map as the leading clean indoor air and indoor air pollution control country in the world. This is a revocabularization talk. I hope I've given you some ways to look at this. Low tar becomes low poison. Ways to talk to people about turning around the vocabulary and the language. Let's not take school-based campaigns for granted. I don't think we just should give kids lectures on the dangers of smoking. We need to involve kids. Next year, I'd like to see this particular conference, if it's held again, held at a junior high school, such as last night in Waycross Junior High School in Waycross, Georgia, where the Ebony R.J. Reynolds Moore Fashion Fair was held. Maybe we ought to go to junior high schools just like tobacco companies do. And look at litigation, support tobacco product litigation. I think we can look at how we can work with the legal profession, Bill Townsley and other attorneys that are here. I believe in criminalization. I know some people have suggested in this state that we should cut off the finger of drug pushers. And I don't know, I think that's a little bit too harsh. But I don't know, it might be, see if Tish or Maxwell or some of these tobacco people might cotton to that approach. I think that that's not exactly something that we should rule out, but I hope that we look more at just reacting to what the industry does, and let's take the initiative to look at divestment, look at boycotting, look at teen access and fire legislation, Joe Ty's work in teen access, and worldwide coordination, which is just beginning in part at this conference and other conferences. Jim Swamley is going to have the agricultural group. And unfortunately, if we don't watch out, and every one of us believing there should no longer be tobacco subsidies, we could wind up putting tobacco in the hands entirely of the tobacco industry from seedling to tumor. And I feel that that would be a very dangerous thing. That's the only area they now do not fully control. Cessation programs I put last but not least, because I think we can learn how to apply to kids what we've learned from talking to people who smoke. DOC was founded in 1977 to educate the public in refreshing ways, especially young people, about the major preventable causes of poor health and high medical costs. We now have over 5,000 physicians and med students and over 100 chapters that Dr. Houston, Dr. Richards, and I have helped to organize. We have injected humor, and that's been our whole approach, to laugh the pushers out of town. And so originally we looked at this kind of advertising, and as much as I love Scott Ballin and the American Heart Association, I feel that just ain't where it's at. We're fighting for your life. I mean, research is good, but Let's use the opportunities we have to do more than just public service advertising, because the tobacco companies come along and they say, we offer you more, because they know how to buy their space. And as Tony Schwartz has told me, the definition of public service advertising, you know, that's the ads that are on at 3 o'clock in the morning telling kids not to take rides with strangers, when the only people up that time of night listening are the strangers. So we wanted to get up on billboards too, but we saw that Ed McMahon informs me that the owner of that billboard is the 3M company, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, makers of Thiolair, Riker Laboratory products, and other brands for our lungs and health. But they wouldn't allow us up on those billboards to rebuke that. And so we went to the Bus Bench Company in Miami and welcomed people to the taste of country fresh arsenic. Now, this was the first paid counter-advertisement in the United States. It ran in 1977 through 1980 in Miami. We paid about $3,000 per year to have these bus benches up. We got doctors to give us the money, and they drive around and they see their bus bench, and they'd say to some friends, you know, that's my bus bench. You're what? You know, nobody knew what we were doing, and we got outraged phone calls. You know, what's this new brand? You didn't put the warning. We got complaints because we didn't put the warning on there. I mean, it's now we didn't do double-blind control studies. We just don't do that. But we did know that there were many more skid marks in front of our bus benches than there were in front of the others. But in any event, then this macho dope came on the scene. You know, I smoke for taste, a cigarette in his crotch, and we simply had him reposed with a much more relaxed, debonair guy with a cigarette dangling out of a different orifice saying, I smoke for smell. Now, this is the kind of approach that even 10 years later can still get kids all over the place laughing. And you can extend this campaign. We need to build on the same theme. You go to a party, you know, and or the debonair couple of the 1980s, you know, they smoke for smell. Now, this next guy looks very uptight. You know, golden lights, you really know you're smoking. Doesn't look too cool. He's got retouched eyes, and so we wanted him to be relaxed, so we got our model to say, yellow lights. They'll really know you're smoking. And, you know, that's really the whole approach, to laugh the pushers out of town, to begin to engender good, cogent ridicule. And we look, though, at what happens when Virginia Slims comes to town, and we take a look at the way in which Chrissy Everett stands in front of the Virginia Slims logos, and Zena Garrison from our own city here, pushing drugs to kids. Notice the sponsors. They always have a rock station. They always have an airline. They always have a perfume company. And in California, the Virginia Slims had as co-sponsor Mattel Toys. This is a ménage à trois. It's not just tobacco companies and sports. It is other seemingly disinterested corporations that the tobacco industry has infected like the AIDS virus. And so we take out our own ads. For the emphysema Slims, you've coughed up long enough, baby. And whereas they use 12-year-old boys as ball boys, we bring in Martina No Smokanova, who dresses up at our Emphysema Slims tennis tournament and welcomes people to this particular event, which Dr. Richards has put on, which we have one here. And Surgeon General Koop and Dr. Steinfeld and others have come down. We've had a congressman give awards out at that particular event. And last Friday, I went to the Red Man Chew tobacco tractor pull here at the Astrodome. And of course, what do you do about something like that? Well, our Nebraska chapter has the Dead Man Chew softball tournament that they have every year to call attention to that particular product. What happened last year, I heard that the U.S. Boomerang team, which I didn't even know we had, was going to Australia under the guise of Philip Morris sponsorship. So I called them up and I said, you don't want to do that. And they said, no, but who else is going to give us the money besides tobacco? And I said, what if we did it? So we raised, in about a week, $9,000 from doctors all over the United States and many others in this room. And we sent the U.S. Boomerang team, not the logo and the boomerang of Newport cigarettes, but we sent the real U.S. Boomerang team wearing our logo, the international no-smoking symbol, to Australia, representing America and Doc. And they won They won the World Boomerang Throwing Championship. So we have a championship team wearing that logo, and I think this is just the first. We now have a fencing team in New York, an inner-city barrio fencing team. We have a rock video that we're working with the fencing team on. I think we're doing counteracting in that regard. I think it's important to challenge other groups that have far more resources to look at sponsorship of teams as they're doing in Australia with the Victorian Health Promotion Foundation. Well, here you are. That's what it boils down to, a drug pusher in the guise of an Indianapolis 500 winner. Danny Sullivan. What do you do about the Marlboro Man like that? Well, we have created somebody that we call the Barfboro Man. And here's a guy that throws up into his hat, and this is what kids are doing. We're coming up with different creative approaches to the Barfboro Man motif. Just to conclude, I wanted to play you a commercial that we just did this past week, and that fellow in that ad is a guy named David Gerlitz for Winston. And here's what he did a couple of weeks ago.
Maybe you recognize me. For 6 years, I hung around your neighborhood, even your own home. I was a drug pusher for a drug that causes the most suffering of all, nicotine. I was an ad model for cigarettes. My name is David Gerlitz, and my face appeared everywhere. Posters, billboards, magazine ads. I was used by a cigarette company to glamorize smoking, and it's a lie. I no longer want to be an ad model for cigarettes. I want to be a role model for my children and other people's children.
This might be sensitive to some people's ears, but I want to give you a bottom line of how this industry operates. This is David when we asked him about what it was like to be on a tobacco-sponsored shoot.
It was one of our first or second shoots that we were on, and we were all sitting around at the end of the day, and I was joking around, and I had asked a question of the account executives of the ad agency and the client who was there visiting, making sure everything was going right. I said, "Say, how come none of you guys smoke?" And one of the guys from the tobacco company said, he laughed, and basically the truth of the matter was, he said, "We don't smoke that shit." And he said, "We reserve that right for the young, the poor, the blacks, and the stupid."
I think that's really the nutshell what we're dealing with. We are not dealing with smoking. We're not dealing with lung cancer. We're not even dealing with Marlboro. We're dealing with corporate parasites. We're dealing with an industry that's going after children, that needs new kids to turn it around. That's our new kids. We call our program Super Health 2000. It used to be called Super Health 79. We've since changed it to Super Health 2000 to give ourselves a little bit more time. I know that I was warned not to take off my jacket and tell you about leaping tall buildings at a single bound and then being faster than a speeding bullet or more powerful than a locomotive and talking about Super Health 2000. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't know precisely how I was going to be here. I didn't know really what shirt to wear. I didn't know whether to wear my Winston drag racing shirt with the Skoal Bandit Pontiac shirt, or the Camel giveaway T-shirt, or my son's Winston T-shirt, or our little nephew's Virginia Slims T-shirt that I bought here in Houston, or the Winston drag racing shirt. And for that matter, I didn't know what hat to wear. What was I wearing? An activist hat, a scientist hat, the Virginia Slims hat, or the Red Man tobacco chew. And when I bought this, I said, "Do you have one for kids?" They said, "Oh, it's easy. You just put that back there, and that'll fit any child." And or the Winston hat, all of which were bought over here at the Astrodome, or the Winston Cup hat, or the Salem Pro Sale Series hat, or the Winston Livestock and Rodeo Show hat, or the Camel Astrodome hat, and so forth. I think what we're dealing with are people who are running rings around where we are today because they have control of the semiotics. I think that it's important to understand that these people are drug pushers. We need a national commission on sports in this country. We need more state-sponsored sporting activities. Otherwise, corporations are going to use that as the way in which they are buying up entertainment for kids. We need more involvement of kids in sports through churches and other civic organizations. We are allowing these corporate parasites to get in and sponsor it for us. Let me close by a comment from Senator Dole, who I admire very greatly, and maybe we could take his advice for dealing with this pandemic.
You don't take on the drug world like a bunch of diplomats. You take it on the only kind of action pushers understand. Tough, street-smart, hard-hitting action that hurts them in the pocketbook and breaks their backs in the courts.
That's where we are today. I'm honored to have been here. I hope that we'll be able to continue some of these things. I'm here with some of the most talented people in this country and people who have, I think, got the makings for turning this issue around well before the year 2000.
There's an official competition to determine the most popular driver in NASCAR, and it comes complete with ballots and voting and all the rest of it. But we here at ESPN decided to conduct an unofficial most popular driver contest, and in order to do it, we thought we'd take a look at T-shirt sales. There's a mountain of souvenirs. T-shirts and caps picturing hot drivers are most popular. They come in all styles, from splashy, tacky, to the clever, to the expensive height-of-speedway fashion. All these trailer trucks crisscross America in the big business of driver popularity. This I don't understand. You got a Kenny Schrader hat, a Bill Elliott T-shirt, and you're standing here at the T-shirt sales place for Dale Earnhardt. Who's your guy?
Kenny Schrader.
How come?
Because I like him and he's real good.